Good evening and welcome to everybody to this meeting of the Audit and Member Standards Committee of the District Council being held in the Council Chamber on the 21st of July 2022. I also extend a welcome to people watching on our YouTube TV channel. The members of the committee are Councillor Spruce, Chair, Owen Vice Chair, Grange, Norman, Robertson, Sylvester Hall, White, Wilcox and Cross. Do we have any apologies?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Richard Cross.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Do we have anyone with a declaration of interest?
Anybody with a declaration of interest? No. Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 20th of April 2022. Yes, Councillor Norman.
I'm pleased to move them, Chair, on the basis that there was an addition made on full council to a later stage, and I'm very grateful for Alan White singling me out for giving that addition at full council. Thank you.
Are you prepared to buy something?
Yes.
Thank you.
First item, the annual Treasury Management Report, which will be given by Anthony Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to go through this one in detail because it's a fairly vanilla report, actually, in the sense of actuals to budgets, but I just highlight a few things to the committee. So I say this every time I come here. This is one of 3 reports that comes to the committee. We bring what we plan to do in the financial year in February as part of the strategy. We bring a mid-year report in November, and then we bring the annual one to committee in July, which basically says how do we perform against the strategy. One thing I did want to highlight to the committee is we have published our draft statement of accounts. We did that on the 1st of July. Well in advance of the current deadline of 31st of July, and they're currently being audited at the moment. Just on planned capital spend, so that was 1.7 million lower than the approved budget, principally due to 3 projects. We didn't complete the Coach Park land acquisition. Dual stream recycling bags weren't received by the 31st of March, and the loan to the company did not take place. Cap receipts were £219,000 higher than budget, probably the same in every other year, principally due to right to buy receipts coming in higher than planned from Bromford. Borrowing the minimum revenue provision, so the money we set aside to repay debt, relatively near to the budget, not a lot of variance there. We did actually repay one of the 2 external PWLB loans right at the end of the year, following committee's view that we should look at that. One of the benefits of interest rates increasing is the premium to actually repay those does fall quite significantly. Couple of things I did want to highlight, and this is in advance of the accounts coming before the committee. In terms of the council's balance sheet, difference between budget and actual, there was one big significant variance between it, which comes here every year to do with the pension liability. About a £19 million swing from budget to actual. Massively impacts on the balance sheet, both in the top half because of the liability and the offsetting pension reserve on the bottom half. It's mainly due to financial assumptions. So that's the pension increase rate, the salary increase rate, and the real discount rate, which the actuary uses. The most significant of those is the real discount rate the actuaries use. So in 2021, the actuary used 2%. In 21-22, the actuaries used 2.7%, and that reflects interest rates increasing and the cost of government debt increasing. Now that rate is used to discount cash flows that are planned to take place in future years to provide a current year estimate of that obligation. So a higher rate, as we've got this year, leads to a lower obligation. In addition, we've got higher working capital and earmark reserves, principally due again to the government providing business rate grants and council tax grants. So that's the £150 council tax rebate in advance of spend, and that meant we had to increase investments at the end of the financial year. The one final thing I would say is the prudential indicators are included in here, and they will go to council later in the year, but we're all compliant with all of them, and we've got no breaches in the treasury limits during the financial year that I need to report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Anthony. So, Councillor Norman first, then Councillor Grange.
It's not quite so much a question. It is just to note the on page 23, which was the risk description and risk owner, and the original score. And this is then one where the original score has stayed the same, or rather the current score has stayed the same as the original score. And that's on items C and D, which is the review of the new homes bonus regime, which we're still waiting for, and the increased localisation of business rates. These two have been, in a sense, hanging over our heads for some time. But I just wanted to say that I do know that those are the two that are still there, as likelihood being read, impact being read, the severity of risk being read, although it's gone into yellow for the impact and severity on one of those, but it's still in the red for the likelihood. And it's not a question unless Anthony can say something about that. It is really just to note it, really.
You want to comment on that, Anthony?
I did have a little bit of hope on these two areas a few weeks ago when the Secretary of State did announce that there'd be a 2-year settlement and the consultation coming out over the summer, but I mean, that was quickly dashed with his resignation. Yeah, and he left his post. Yeah, and I'm not sure now because the consultation was due to come out later in the summer, and I'm not even sure that can be issued. So I don't know. I think we're back to where we were probably a few months ago now in terms of uncertainty in those areas.
Councillor Grange.
Thank you, Chair. I've got probably half a dozen, Anthony. Do you want them one at a time? First one on page 11, the overspend on the office refit of 124,000 quid. I'd like a bit of a flavour behind what that is, and also it seems that we're going to be converting revenue to capital budgets. We're taking that from the maintenance budget for 22-23. Any comments on that and what that relates to?
Yeah, so I think there's two elements to that. So there's an element of profiling. So I think the reason, and that isn't a revenue budget, that property plan maintenance budget is actually a capital budget. The word maintenance probably a little bit doesn't quite describe what it's for. It is maintenance in the sense of enhancement rather than day-to-day things like that. It has cost more than we planned, and it is the opening out of the office upstairs. If you've been up there, we can accommodate it within the next year's budget, and that's why it's an oversight. We'll re-profile the budget to accommodate it. But it is fair to say it has cost more than planned, principally because some of the enhancements that were not envisaged at the time have probably been felt necessary as the project progressed.
Thank you. Next point, I'm revisiting the pensions. Accept the 19.1 against budget, but if I'm looking against the actual 2021 to actual 21-22, sorry, the approved budget 21-22, that's gone up as well. So have you got a feel for what the actuarial valuation is actually going to look like at the end of the financial year? Because I'm guessing these are still draft numbers at this stage.
So the numbers we've included in here were based on the second of 3 pension reports we got from the actuary. There has been a third one, but it's quite a small difference to these numbers. I mean, I think net it was in the region of £80,000. So these figures, and that's obviously subject to audit, are what the pension actors provided in the version we've used in the accounts. I'm not conscious that we are going to make significant changes to that through the audit unless something's found.
I'm guessing that. Page 17, 0.3.54. We've got a book gain at the moment on the investments of 33 against a volatility reserve of 329. So clearly a £363,000 swing is going to be needed before that reserve is insufficient. How are those investments looking? What's your gut feel on the adequacy of that reserve?
At the end of June, that swung quite significantly. So I think we're talking about something in the region of a book loss of around 500,000. That reserve will increase to about 400. So we're talking about a net loss at the end of June of about 200,000. I suspect it's very volatile at the moment. You could well find in a few months' time that swung around further. The reason we set that volatility risk reserve was exactly to cover this type of event. I suppose with foresight, it's proven valuable to do that.
Thank you. Page 19, and I'm sure we've had this conversation before. Our risk on investments at the moment is running at A+. Our risk appetite is for A-. What sort of level of hit on the reward are we taking by not taking as much risk as we've got an appetite to have?
That's a difficult question to answer, to be honest. We are what? 2 steps off, I think, there. So from A+ to A to A-. In the current climate, I would say that's probably a relatively small drop-off, to be honest. But in number terms, I probably couldn't give you a number because it's just so volatile. That's the problem.
Thank you. Page 20 on 3.62, external borrowing. We repaid one of the public works loans. Are we looking to repay the second just because the margin between the borrowing rate and the investment rate is worth possibly having a look at and realising that?
We will look at it each time we got a valuation to repay the other one. We got one for this. This repayment thing was significantly higher a few months ago. As I said, as interest rates increase, that reduces. The savings annually with this one, though, are lower because it's a much longer loan. So total cost of the loan is much higher, but annually it's obviously spread. So the benefit of doing that is much lower. But yes, we will consider that.
Final one, Anthony, you got there. Page 28, since the year end, we've had about 10 million quid of fixed term investments come to the end of their term. What's happened with them? Have they just been rolled over?
Yeah, they will have been reinvested. Off the top of my head, I don't know where, but at the moment, I'll be honest, it's quite difficult to find investment homes with the sheer volume of cash, certainly in the public sector that there is at the moment. But yeah, they will have been reinvested.
Thank you.
Well done, good selection of questions. Thank you, Councillor Grange. Councillor Ho.
Thank you, Chair. My query is a follow-up on Councillor Grange's question regarding page 11, the office project. Can we have assurances that the office furnishings were disposed of in an environmental manner? Were they recycled or repurposed? Thank you.
I cannot physically give you an assurance that, but I will speak to the property manager who led on that project, and I will get an assurance from him how they were disposed of. And I'll circulate that to the committee.
Councillor Norman.
I could probably help that answer actually, which is initially they were putting the skip, and then with a bit of publicity, it was spotted. And then what happened was that people were able to come and collect any bits they wanted from the skip, any bits of furniture. And quite a few did that. So initially, it wasn't. You seemed to have got missed with the contractors and others, but after that, people were later going down details. But I obviously see that all for myself from the window of the chief executive's office. In any case, so I thought it brilliant at the same time. So that may be about. I've got one little question myself, actually, which I meant to mention before. This is about page 25 on the capital programme performance in Appendix A. I can't work out, and it may be in the text somewhere, why some are highlighted and others aren't. But the one I'm particularly interested in is the Old Mining College decision shaping place total. Old Mining College refurbish access and signs, £13,000. That's still not been spent. I think that's not been allocated rather, or paid over to the town council of the Old Mining College. But I'm not sure why there was some highlighted, or some are highlighted by virtue of not being highlighted. Yeah, you help me with that, please, through your chair.
So, in accounting, the two types of capital programme expenditure. So, the ones we highlighted in are the traditional what you would normally your asset expenditure. So you buy a building, you buy a facility, you buy property, etc. The other type, which are the non-highlighted, is something snappily titled REFCAs, which is revenue expenditure funded from the capital under statute. So effectively what it means is, in accounting terms, it's not capital expenditure. The government says you can treat it as capital expenditure. And the reason we highlight that is it appears in different places on the balance sheet.
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a few. I think quite as many as Councillor Grange, but three on this if we can. Page 11, the table at 310, has got about £1.5 million worth of slippage in there. Obviously, there is a bit of a situation with inflation at the minute. Are we comfortable that that's we're not going to run into problems on those if they continue to be kind of pushed over and rolled into future years, that the cost of those projects isn't going to become a problem? And if it is, do we need to go to cabinet and start talking about potentially getting some additional capacity and see if we can move them forwards faster? Have we done that work to see if we got some capacity in to get them out the door? Would it be cheaper than potentially waiting for inflation to make the prices go up?
I think it's a good point. We haven't done that piece of work. Some of them on this list. So if I take the low council development company, which is quite a big significant element of it, that was pending the review of the company. Now that review is being undertaken. What we now need to look at is does the company actually still need £675,000, because that was all based upon the council acquiring land, developing property, selling it on. It's no longer doing that. It's looking at more at providing services to the council. So I think that one's subject to a further review, and I think we have started that, and we're just trying to get a little bit more of a handle on the company business plan. A number of the other ones, so if I take the dual stream recycling bank, I think that's probably been spent now, or it's close to being spent. Some of the other construction ones, yeah, they possibly may need to. I mean, we did bill based on the committee's views, I think, during the MTFS, some money in for construction inflation. But it's certainly something we can look at in the next iteration of that program, which we know is close to starting now.
Thank you for that. I think, my apologies about that, clearly throat. Next one is down on page 15, paragraph 3.46. I noticed in there that we're looking at our average rates from the revised budget to actual has gone up by 0.05%. Borrowing stayed a bit stable. In a situation where between those 2 points, the base rate has, I think, tripled, possibly gone up by 3.5 times. When are we expecting our kind of investment income to track with that? Because I would have expected, I mean, a lot of our investments are on fixed term bases. They come back within 100 days. I kind of expect to see that kind of ticking upwards by now, unless I'm missing something in line.
Yes, you are right that it has started to tick up now. I think obviously a number of the investments are fixed, as you quite rightly say, and therefore you're locked into a rate until they mature. Certainly with the strategic investments, they don't necessarily track base rate. So there's a combination of those, and that's an average rate for the year, when a lot of the year may have been at the lower rate with the lower money, if you see what I mean. It doesn't necessarily correlate, a little jump up in sync with the base rate, but I know for a fact this year so far that's gone up quite a lot. That's one of the plus sides on the sort of that will help us to mitigate some of the cost of inflation increases.
Thank you for that. I figured it might just be kind of lagging in the figures here. Apologies, the next one I've skipped one, I'm back up on page 14, I do apologise. I'm noting there we're talking about total usable reserves. There's a mention about the Burnwood Sinking Fund. I've not come across that term before, and we had quite a large argument at council earlier on in the year about whether we should have reserves set aside for certain geographical areas, which I don't want to rehash here, but can we just say kind of where that Burnwood Sinking Fund is coming from, how much there is in it, and where it's going?
So that was one specifically set up for the leisure centre when it was built. I think at the time it was funded from capital receipts. I can't remember how much is left in it, but it's probably in the low hundreds of thousands, but it was specifically set up for Burnwood Leisure Centre.
Thank you for that, sorry, and possibly should have picked up that. Right, I think I've got one or two more. He says, desperately looking to see if you can find the notes that one is my good thing. I think that's me on this item, actually. Oh, sorry, no, there it is. There is one. I do apologise. On the very last page of this report, page 28, we've got the curve there showing kind of central case interest rates and where our current deals are. It's showing that April 22 we're doing very well. But I just can't see that, certainly on the interest rate side, again, the ones that are slightly further off to the future are very low, unless I'm misreading that and I've got the axes the wrong way around. Am I misreading that?
No, I think you're right there. What that graph's trying to show, maybe is to show how much of our investment portfolio is spread over a period, and how then we're able to track interest rate changes. So in theory, because we've got quite a lot in April, May, June, which are near maturity, we're able to reinvest that at higher interest rates. So we're not locked in into longer term investments, which aren't necessarily taking the advantage of interest rates increasing.
I found the other post-it note, which is definitely the one I wanted to watch. And fixed term investments with other local authorities. I know we've got one with Monmouthshire and one with Moray. They're both, I believe, unitary authorities, and I know they're Scotland and Wales respectively, so slightly different structures than there are in England. But do we have any concerns currently about Monmouthshire and Moray with their responsibilities around social care? Because I know that's one of the reasons why we don't invest in top tier authorities in England.
No, at the moment. I think Conway County might be another one that's Welsh as well, further down. So no, I think their support arrangements with the devolved administrations are slightly different to England. That was more than me.
Yeah, it's very late. I've been advised by House of Revenue.
No. Said you had less.
I've just got one question from the chair, if I may, Anthony. The non-acquisition of the coach path, which is considered by many to be very important in terms of attracting tourists, is that a delay or is it that negotiations gone wrong?
I wouldn't say it's negotiations that have gone wrong. I think it's more to do with negotiations full stop. In any acquisition or any purchase, you tend to have different views on what the terms should be. And I think this particular site has had added complications because there was some sort of covenants attached to it, which we're having to find a way through at the moment. So I don't think it's through not wanting to acquire or not being able to. I think it's just the nature of negotiations through a land purchase, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
We couldn't have a real good, anybody else have any question? Can I refer you back to the recommendations? We've reviewed the report and the issues raised within, and we reviewed the actual 2021 presentation indicated contained in the report. Are we all happy?
Yeah.
Thank you all very much. Next item on number 5 is the Centre Resilience Index.
Anthony again, please.
Okay, so I'm going to talk around the report and I'm going to add a little bit as well, because this is around resilience. So this is the third year that CIPRA published the Resilience Index, and it forms part of their financial management code, which the committee saw last year, I think it was. So the index is designed to support and improve discussions around local authority financial resilience by showing the council's position against a range of measures associated with financial risk. This is increasingly important because there are more interventions, potential interventions, taking place in local government than there ever was before, and there's more than likely going to be more in the current climate. The index, however, is backward looking, and for 2022, it starts to identify the impact of the pandemic on reserve and fee and charge levels, certainly district councils. And this district council on the whole compares well to nearest neighbours and other district councils. However, if we look forward looking, and there is an agenda item later on the meeting, the strategic risk register continues to show a strategic risk around the availability of finance. That tends to be more looking at what the current position is and what the future environment's likely to be. That risk is outside of risk appetite and in the red zone, due to principally to the response I gave to Councillor Norman earlier around local finance reform. There is some residual impact to do with COVID and the inflationary pressures that are in the economy at the moment. As I said earlier, I did have a little bit of hope with the local finance reform, but that does seem to have changed, and it remains to be seen whether that's still the direction of travel the government's going to take. What I did want to talk a little bit around as well, though, is the current economic environment within inflation. So yesterday, the consumer price index increased from 9.1 to 9.4%. It's a long time since I can remember us having inflation levels at this level. The LGA estimates that pressure for local government in 2022-23 to be 2.4 billion, which will increase to 3.6 billion 24-25. Now, we are currently looking at the assumptions we've used in our medium-term financial strategy, which was only approved back in February, but has moved a long way from the assumptions we use. And for us, this council, the ones that are our biggest risk area are around salaries and wages. So we budgeted at 2% every year. I think the pay negotiators are advising that 22-23 and 23-24, that's probably going to be in the region of 4 to 5%. We did budget at electricity at 10% increase each year based on information we had from our utility provider. Gas is at 5% flat, but another one that's got significant pressures at the moment is fuel, both because of the price of oil increasing and our grounds maintenance crews were using red diesel, which we're no longer allowed to use now. So that's automatically another increase. The other one I wanted to highlight is insurance is at 5%, seems quite reasonable, but we are procuring a new insurance provider from 23-24. We're just starting that, and it'll be interesting to see what the impact on the budget is of any new provider in the current climate. So I'm quite happy to take any other questions around that report from members.
Yes, Councillor.
Chairman, the only comment I would make is I think you're erring on the right side of caution, to be perfectly honest, and the figures that you're talking about, Anthony. So I don't think it's going to be any better than that. It could possibly be even worse scenario, I think. But I think it's wise that we're erring on the word of caution on those sort of figures. Definitely, so good place to be in that sense. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor.
Well, I'm tempted to ask Anthony who would prefer as leader of the, for local government, but I won't, Chairman, I won't put him in that position.
The recommendation is simply that we know the results of the simple resilience index of 2022. So, happy with that?
Thank you all very much indeed. The next item, number 6, is the internal audit progress report. Regretfully, our head of internal audit, Andrew, is indisposed. But Anthony is going to stand in for him. So good luck.
Yes, so I will take members through this, but whether I'll be quite as versed in providing answers. So if I can't provide an answer, I will seek to get one from Andrew by email. So just on this particular report, so this is the Internal Audit Manager's quarterly progress report, which outlines the work that's been completed by the internal audit team to the end of June. It contains a lot more detail in Appendix 1. The audit manager would like to highlight to the committee that internal audit have completed 10% of the audit plan, slightly below and behind the profile completion target, 22.5%. As outlined in the report, there's a number of reasons for this. So the last completion of the remaining audit for council tax from 21-22 has been prioritised. Andrew and the principal auditor have been involved in quite a number of grant assurance pieces of work which weren't envisaged at the time. The government seems to have discovered that local authorities have Section 151 officers and internal audit managers, and therefore every single grant that seems to be coming out now requires a sign-off, and it is quite a piece of work to do that. We have procured an IT auditor and they've started their reviews. We're in the process of procuring a general auditor through the NHS framework agreement to enable completion of the audit planning in what is a challenging audit environment, both firm-wise and recruiting individuals. These resources, together with the in-house team, should provide sufficient resources to ensure completion of the plan to both the quality and the rate expected by the committee. Andrew does want me to mention, though, that there is a risk, saying that the current level of organisational change that's taking place in the council, with quite a number of managers leaving and moving into the organisation, mean that that may not be achieved, but he is working towards achieving 90% of the audit plan, and he will provide progress reports regularly to the committee. Probably one other thing to highlight, there are currently 5 high priority recommendations still outstanding. All of those are going to be revisited as part of the audit plan in 22-23. Certainly the IT auditor is revisiting the IT high priority recommendations. And the audit manager will keep the committee appraised of progress against those recommendations at the conclusion of the audit reviews. I wouldn't say I'm happy to take any questions, but I will seek to answer any questions.
Thank you. I think Councillor Grange was first and then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. It's probably, I've got one specific and one general, and I'll address the general first, and it's maybe one for us to discuss as a committee. The perception I get from reading the report is that the work programme's behind, there's a risk that programmes won't be achieved, resources are a problem, Anthony's point, there's more time being spent on consultancy advice, open actions aren't being dealt with. And I think we can all appreciate that the audit team are working really, really hard. But should we as a committee be concerned now that all the red flags are coming out, that audit actions aren't being dealt with, audits aren't happening as they should? And should we as a committee be making some noise about that now, while there's still the opportunity in the rest of the year to bring things back on track?
Yes, Anthony.
Yeah, so I just, in response to that, yes, we have made those warnings, but I think there probably were similar warnings made last year, and Andy did deliver near the 90% of the plan. So, you know, at the first quarter stage, I don't think he's overly concerned. There is the ability to reprofile some of the audits around to catch that up, but there are things happening that are outside of his control, which means it is a risk, and I think it's right to flag this up with the committee at this stage.
Thank you. My one specific, and Anthony, you can probably deal with this one. On the debtors audit, can I just get some flavour around the suspense account, the variance on the debtors reconciliation? Page 48, if it helps.
So I know we do a monthly reconciliation of debtors to the core financial general ledger system. That has been caught up today, so I'd have to get a bit more detail on that, but I'm pretty sure all the reconciliations at the end of the financial year were completed to enable the external auditors to look at that. There is within the debtor system, or there used to be with the former debtor system, if cash couldn't be identified, it was put into a suspense account pending an officer going in and then identifying which debt it should be assigned to. I mean, I have to get a little bit more detail if that doesn't answer the question sufficiently for you.
I think I would like a little bit more detail, just because it's the sort of thing that you know, you know as well as I do, Anthony, it's the sort of thing that if in an accounts department, cash should be allocated properly and there shouldn't be variances between your supporting docs and your general ledger. So yes, please, to some additional. Thank you.
Anthony, when you send additional information, you do it to all members of the committee, please.
So councillors Minister Hall.
Thank you, Chair. It does go on a little bit actually from the previous comments that Councillor Grange made about the resources that are there. It does state quite clearly the state of flux. I think that there's been experience. Just a little bit of clarity, if you can, on are we looking at trying to make sure that those resources are internal ones? So we've got some experience of the inside, or how much are being procured, which I think is what you've mentioned previously, and appreciating it is Q1, is to anticipate how the likelihood of it is of being able to access whichever of those different resources. Are they likely to be available in the time frame that we need them? Cheers.
So the audit team is made up of 4 posts at the moment. The head of internal, Andrew, is in post. The principal auditor is an internal officer, is in post. We have 2 other posts, senior auditor and a trainee or junior. And those are the ones that we haven't got people in post. They're not the senior roles within the team. They're the people that tend to do the lower level pieces of work. Those are the parts we're trying to procure from another organisation. We did it last year with another company, and we have tried to recruit in the market. We've been out twice and not been successful at all. As I say, it's a very challenging environment. It isn't just us. Even when we talk to the companies we're trying to procure from, they're having similar issues. So we're looking at potentially one of the bigger firms to now come in, which is used by a neighbouring authority, and they've got good references around them. So the senior roles are internal when they're in place, it's the more junior roles.
Thank you for that. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just going to pick up on other points that we've kind of come across, but I think are worth restating. The 5 outstanding high priority actions are all, I think, now at least 5 quarters old. We've got to get them done. We have to get them done. It's been a year and a quarter, so I think when they come through, I'd appreciate being informed as they are finished and signed off and reviewed. I'd appreciate that coming out at the time, because I think they're long overdue now. And I think it's something that we really do need to prioritise. And then the second item is again following on from Councillor Sylvester Hall and Councillor Grange. I'm concerned about capacity, because I know last year we're behind. And I think we actually reprofiled some of this from last year's schedule into this year's. But that if we're now in a situation where we're looking again, we're already less than halfway of where we should be, I'm concerned that we're going to end up pushing things back. I don't know, again, if it's a situation that we need to, at this committee, have that discussion, potentially write a letter to the leader to discuss what can be done. I know we've recently had that discussion at full council about what we do with development management. And are we in a situation where actually we potentially need to look at, are there marketisation incentives that we can use to get people on board to make sure we're on top of this? We're very fortunate at this council that we do regularly get clean bills of health and everything comes back. Very fortunate. We are very lucky in that regard. I don't want to see that change. And certainly for me, obviously, depending on where the numbers look and things like that, I think it's something that we should at least explore.
Thank you, Councillor Robson. I particularly agree with that point. Can I just go back to page 39, please, Anthony, which I think Councillor Robson mentioned. I find it very dispiriting, really, that all the high, medium and low, all of them are higher now than they were a quarter ago. Now, as I understand, this is largely down to the management of various departments to correct these matters and report back to the interim. Is the big changeover that's going, and we have lost some really big hitting managers in the last 3 months, is that the cause for it? Because this needs taking in underhand, so it'll go out of hand very, very quickly.
I suppose there is a combination of reasons. I think obviously as new audits are undertaken, this list gets added to. I think that there will be an element though of, as members of staff change, especially the manager level, there is going to be a period where a new member of staff comes in and has to learn the area and understand what's going on before they can really start to address some of the issues in that area. I mean, in my own team, we lost a procurement manager. We then recruited in, and we've got procurement matter. That takes time for that person to get up to speed. And I think that's just one area. Some areas of the council are getting far more change in the staff that are there. And I think that is inevitably going to have an implication on the internal audit team being able to deliver its audit plan.
If I may, could we perhaps here we had 2 closed in the quarter out of well over 100. That's unacceptable. We need, I think, at least to be sure that that is coming down. We've got to find the resources from somewhere. Otherwise, in another 6 months, as I said before, it'll be out of control. Is the rest of the committee happy with that approach?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Wilcox.
Sorry, Councillor Norman, you were first.
Thank you. Well, I was not going to mention it, say this right at the very beginning, before I even got here, which is we're on page 34, which is the failure to complete the audit plan for 22-23 due to organisational change and so on. The likelihood was the original score was likelihood yellow, impact red, severity red, but the current score is likelihood green, impact yellow, severity yellow. So are we saying that they're optimistic about that or not? Because we seem to be saying something different. So that's my first question. I've got some other shorter ones later. But that's what the risk assessment says. Is that accurate or what? Do you, Chair? First or no? First of all.
So I would say that's accurate in Andrew's opinion at the time principally because we're probably only 3 months into the financial year, so there is, in his view, I would imagine there is time to address that through various means, so the procurement, reprofiling the plan, etc., etc. So there is time to address that now.
Okay, thank you. On page 42, there's the reference there to the environmental health food inspections, which is very close to my heart actually. And the risk-based review environmental health food inspections to include the review of plants. And I actually thought we had well, we did that. You should have gone to all members, but it only went to the regulatory licensing members. A briefing paper which showed there was a real worry about food inspections being completed, contrary to the response by the leader of the council when it was raised at last full council. So I don't know what the answer is there. I certainly wish to pursue that, but just wanted to point out the sort of, I would suggest, contradiction there from the information from the officers, I would suggest, and then the information from the political leadership. I just want about climate change on the next page. Risk-based review looking at the council's preparation to decarbonisation and climate change agenda. Could just ask what that will be doing, looking at. So I've got one more question after that. What does that comprise of? Do you, I don't know whether through your charity does know, or
I don't know the detail of that, but I imagine, and I'll get clarification on this, it's to look at the council. Has the council got a action plan or a strategy to deliver on its climate change pledge? And how is it progressing on delivering against that target and that action plan?
well, I'm grateful that that's what the task group that I'm a chair of will be looking at the next time. So I suppose that should be able to help. Last one's a little dig here, because on page on the, well, I can't see the page here, but a bit further down, payroll and assurances-based review on the effectiveness of payroll controls following the transition from Stafford Borough Council to Stoke City Council, the new payroll agency. But in actual fact, we had an email for those who benefit from a special responsibility allowance. There was a bit of a cock up there, and it wasn't sent to us, so you know, it didn't quite work quite as smoothly. Hopefully, that was just a small glitch. It only affected elected members, and nothing any bigger that affected the more important employees of the organisation. But I just wanted to dig there, because that was the case. Although my timing might be out on these papers, but that's what in May earlier on.
I believe it was only an issue that affected elected members. I can.
So you don't care then.
No.
You should have said, "I'm very sorry. I'm very sorry," but it did affect length. No, that's fine, Chair. Thank you. That's good.
Yeah. It certainly, I can confirm it certainly wasn't something I noticed.
Is that all your questions, Councillor Norman?
Don't ask anymore.
Councillor White.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to perhaps have a slightly more nuanced approach to the fact that we're behind with the audit programme. It's easy for us to sit here and say, well, you know, it's not acceptable, it isn't acceptable, but there are going to be causes for the symptoms that we see here. And Anthony alluded to it already, didn't he, when he said there's trouble recruiting, so that junior posts aren't filled. Councillor Grange talks about getting interim staff in, and I think we've got to be slightly careful about how we feed this back to Andrew, because he may be completely snowed under because of a lack of staff. So the question is, are there problems with the terms and conditions? Are we advertising the right channels? Are we responding to adverts quickly enough? I know in some places the speed of an application for a job by people going for a job, they get a response back or not in 24, 48 hours. If they don't hear back from the organisation, they just move on to the next. So are we as quick and slick and efficient as we could be compared to our competitors who are fishing in the same pond? So before we go down the route of saying, Andrew, it's totally unacceptable, let's just make sure that the upstream causes have been addressed and he hasn't been left high and dry as a consequence of something that's completely outside his control.
Thank you, Councillor White. That's a good counterbalance to it, but I think he's right as a committee that we do express our disappointment with the way things are going, and whatever action can be taken is taken. Councillor Ho, then Councillor Grange.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a declaration of interest. On page 42, my family's business is subject to food safety inspections, so I just wanted to be completely transparent about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that okay with this? Thank you. Councillor Grange.
Thank you, Chair. I completely agree with Councillor White. I don't think this is a kicking session for the head of audit. I think it's more what can we do as a committee to support and make sure that he is getting the responses he needs from the managers. So completely agree.
Are there any more questions? Our recommendation is to note the internal audit quarterly progress report, including stock report is the 30th June 2022. Item 7. It's another item should be by Andrew. Would it be going to
So on an annual basis, the audit manager brings forward an annual self-assessment of his opinion as to whether internal audit have complied with the public sector internal audit standards and the quality assurance improvement programme. Last year, the audit manager concluded that they were in compliance with those standards. It also monitors ongoing performance and compliance, and no specific changes were identified or made in 21-22 in that programme. However, to give further assurance to the committee and the public, the standards require an external quality assessment as well. So that's somebody outside of the internal audit team of the organisation. The last review that we undertook was in 2017, and they happen every 5 years. So the shared audit service is scheduled for one during this financial year. We're currently in the process of sourcing suitable external assessors for that. There tends to be a relatively limited number in the market. People like SIP for the Institute of Internal Auditors, and a few smaller firms provide that service. What the external assessor will do will gain the views of stakeholders of internal audit and independently assess compliance against those standards. Once that's completed, a report will be provided at the conclusion, and that will be reported to audit member standards together with any action plan for improvements, and those improvements will then form part of an update to the quality assurance improvement programme. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
That's quite unusual. There are no questions. So presumably the recommendation that we noted the internal audit compliance with the BSIS Appendix 1 and the QAIB on Appendix 2. Sorry, Catherine.
No, sorry, Chair, but just asking Anthony about what's the timescales of all that being achieved.
So Andrew at the moment is sourcing the group that will do that independent assessment. I'm not quite sure when it gets reported back, and we did say during the year. So, I mean, from my memory, it's a relatively short process. It talks to a select group of individuals, and it quickly comes to the report. I think certainly the third group last time were well versed in doing it.
Thank you. The one that always takes a fair bit of our time. Item 8, the risk management update. Yet again, yours, Anthony.
So this is the audit manager's regular update in respect to strategic risk management, which includes the strategic risk register. Last updated following review by the leadership team on the 22nd of June this year. All the updates that have been made to the strategic risk register are shaded in yellow. Probably a couple of things I just want to mention. So SR1, as we've discussed previously, which is around financial risk, is the only one that's currently outside of the council's risk appetite. In my view, that's largely due to external factors. that we can't control. However, we will look at risk management options, including the assumptions we use for inflation as part of the development of the new MTFS. There are a couple of updates to highlight on the horizon scanning section. So these are, they're not risks at this particular point, but they may develop into risks at some point. So one I think that we've mentioned before is in relation to voter registration requirements. And the second one is the impact of Ukrainian visitors to the district. And that's specifically to do with either breakdown of relationships between hosts and visitors. And in those circumstances where those people can't be rematched, potential for homelessness applications within the council. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Yes, Councillor Grange.
Thank you, Chair. Strategic risk 7 seems to have been reduced from 6 to 9, and I couldn't see any changes to our mitigation. So it seems to be a perception of the external risk. I was just a bit surprised by that. So I did a bit of digging, and DCMS, GCHQ, National Cyber Security Centre are all saying that that cyber attack risk hasn't gone away. So I was just interested to understand what factors led to that decision of the downgrading of that risk.
If I remember rightly, it was increased significantly, I believe, at the outbreak of the war between Ukraine and Russia, because I think there was a feeling at that time that there would be potentially state players that would attack government systems. I think the reason it's been reduced is that at this point, from our perspective, there hadn't been any evidence that was taking place at this council. Although we are a government organisation, we're probably quite small in the scheme of things. So I think in the absence of any evidence at that time, the score was reduced. It's as simple as that. We do review that every time it comes to the leadership team, and that is probably one of the 2 or 3 risks we do focus a lot of attention.
Thank you. I mean, just to come back on that, I actually saw a blog post from the 5th of July this year from the National Cyber Security Centre that was specifically suggesting that now's not the time to be complacent with respect from Russian cyber security attacks. So I would like that one, I think, to be reviewed again. So I'll just note that.
Another one. Councillor Norman.
It's only so I've mentioned before, but the LGA take it all very seriously, and there is a lot of training and advice that they give to local authorities, or is available for local authorities and chief executives. And I'm involved in one of the boards that has looked at that in the past. We've got a meeting next week as well, in fact. So I don't think it has gone away, but I understand the point that Anthony's made. But it's such a big thing because, well, the effect of an attack on the local authorities, the cost and all that plot, that's the serious part of it. But the LGA, I believe, are on top of that and can provide help with all local authorities if they're asking for it.
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. 3 on this, if I can. First one on SR2, resilience of teams to effectively respond to further serious disruption to service. I know that SR3 has already kind of been adapted to look at the change in management. I cannot see how the very significant changes at the management level that we've had in the organisation, why it can't have changed the resilience of the teams to be able to do this, because if we've got people who are new in post, they're not going to have that same type of knowledge that you just get from being in an organisation for months and years. So I was a little bit, I would have expected that to have increased, if I'm brutally honest. And yeah, I'm aware that that's been fed into another risk, but I can't see that change in our management level wouldn't have had an impact on SR2.
Okay, I mean, I will take that one back along with the one Councillor Grange has raised on the cybersecurity risk for review. I mean, what I would say is that myself, Christine, Simon are in post at the moment. We have got people in the 3 statutory officer roles, And we have got 2 incoming assistant directors in just under a month's time, which will add to that. So I take on board your point that it may be that by the time we come to review it next time, that's improved in any case.
Thanks for that, and yeah, I hope so, but I think in terms of if we are looking at serious events, if that's a serious event around flooding and we've got a number of displaced families, that wouldn't necessarily come under one of the statutory roles. So I think that's something that could be looked at again. The second point I've got is actually also on the horizon scanning around elections. The AEA wrote to the Secretary of State 9 days ago. The letter is pretty strong. In their opinion, that's the opinion of the Association of Returning Officers. In their opinion, the timescales are not sufficient. So I think that's something, again, we may need to review and potentially look at, because certainly the Association of Returning Officers is saying that there's significant concerns about, not just around voter ID, but also around the additional checks around postal votes and things like that. And then my last one, if I can, just looking at the matrix, I know that we've only got SR1 that's out of tolerance, but we've also got 5 of 7 risks that are 9s, which is pretty high. So again, I'm just looking at this, and is this something that actually we need to have a bigger conversation about? Because I know last year we had a discussion, and Councillor White recommended the chair write to the leader of the council to say that we needed these risks to come down. Do we need to have a total for the total number of strategic risks and the total for all of these added up? Just because 1 out of tolerance and everything else in the green is a very different situation to 1 out of tolerance and the vast majority of them ever so slightly just below that red area. And it just seems that we've got a lot that are teetering on the edge of becoming serious.
Yes, okay.
Councillor White.
I just wanted to build on Councillor Robinson's point, because he makes a really excellent point, and it's a question to you, Chair, because some of these risks that are in the register have been here for a long time at quite a high level. The owner of the mitigation of the risks, surely there's an onus on them to deliver. And I wonder whether or not, Mr. Chairman, you might consider asking some of the owners of some of the risks to come before this committee to, just ask some challenging questions like, it's been on here for ages, it doesn't seem to be making a move, you own the mitigation, come on, just tell us all about it, because we've developed some concerns. And poor old Anthony and Andrew are the conduit of our questions, and he must leave here going, bloody hell, councillors. But actually, sometimes if we can go direct to the person involved, I think that would demonstrate that there's a committee, we're quite serious about this, particularly in areas that Councillor Grange highlights, where some of it's maybe even getting worse, or the other way around, coming down when actually, yeah, maybe. Okay.
Is it the wish of the committee that we request, because I don't think we can order, we request the chief executive and one senior.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not suggesting we get the whole of the cabinet in or senior leadership team, but I did notice, I don't want to skip ahead to the next agenda, the work program. It's a little light next. So if we fancied filleting someone just for a laugh, then I mean, asking them questions about their mitigation, that would be great.
So we ask maybe the chief executive and another senior manager on one of the points to be available at the next meeting, if possible, please. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else?
Has anybody else got anything to raise? Have we received assurance on actions taking place to manage the council's most significant risks? Is what the recommendation is saying. Yeah, exactly. We are concerned, and what you have worded will be, but we need the chief executive to understand that we are concerned.
I'll make sure that the committee's concerns are noted.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed.
How are you not related to Councillor Strachan?
The last item on the agenda is normally
A fairly straightforward one, our work programme. It's fairly standard. Has anybody got any comment on it? Yes, councillor White.
The next meeting is all depends on how the auditors are going. Have you had any sort of briefing as to where they're getting on with that? At all?
No, but we do have our external auditor with us, and I'm sure she will be happy to give an opinion, maybe.
It wasn't on the agenda. The audit has started. It seems to be going okay so far. There are a few hiccups with the ledger transfer, getting the right kind of reports, looking at journals, listings, transactional listings. But we're going okay so far, and we haven't found any significant issues.
Thank you for that. If I can, I know I've said it to this committee before in previous years. We do have an excellent relationship between our team led by Anthony and your firm of Grant Thornton. And it's vital. It's such a vital thing in good financial governance and what have you. You've seen no change in that. But...
No, all still rosy.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed.
But just to clarify, we are independent.
Mr. Chairman, rosy, not cosy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are there any other comments on that work programme? Now we understand why we have 6 meetings a year, we used to have 3. In this case, I officially call the meeting over at 7:06 PM.
And thank you all very much indeed for your continued effort. As you know, it's largely unchanged but for one person from last year. It's good work. It's good to have you all back for this last year. Thank you all.
Thank you.